Tessa Blake thought she had found stability as a live-in housekeeper for the enigmatic millionaire Damien Thorne, but she never expected to capture the heart of a man still grieving his late wife. When quiet glances and stolen moments bloom into something deeper, Tessa must navigate the treacherous waters of loving someone from a different world while learning to value herself for who she truly is. Damien, haunted by loss and careful with his heart, discovers that sometimes the greatest act of love is patience, waiting for someone to awaken to their own worth before offering everything. This is a story of dignity, respect, and the transformative power of a love that sees beyond social boundaries to honor the soul within. Before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Thorne estate, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Tessa Blake adjusted her simple uniform and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. At 25, she was finally starting to feel like she had found some stability in her life, even if it was as a live-in housekeeper for one of the city's most mysterious millionaires. 6 months ago, she'd been desperate for work, her bank account nearly empty after her mother's medical bills had drained her savings. The job offer to work for Damien Thorne had seemed too good to be true. Excellent pay, room and board in his sprawling mansion, and benefits that most people in her position could only dream of. "Miss Blake, a moment, please," came the deep voice from the study. Tessa's heart did that little jump it always did when Damien spoke to her. At 34, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who knew his place in the world. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, his custom suits impeccable, but it was his eyes that caught her attention from the first day, intense and observant, yet somehow sad. "Yes, Mr. Thorne," she asked, stepping into the warmly lit study where he spent most of his days. "I noticed you reorganized my bookshelves," he said, looking up from his laptop. "For you separated the fiction from non-fiction." Tessa felt her stomach drop. "I'm sorry, I thought it would be more efficient. I can put everything back." To her surprise, Damien's serious expression softened. "No need. It's actually much better this way. I've been meaning to do it myself for months." He closed his laptop. "Thank you." It was these small moments that confused her. The Damien Thorne that the world knew, the ruthless businessman, the recluse who avoided public appearances, the man whose cold logic had built an empire, was so different from the man she saw every day. The man who carefully folded the corners of his books instead of using bookmarks. The man who left little notes thanking her for making his favorite breakfast. The man who noticed when she was tired and brought her chamomile tea without being asked. "Will you be dining in tonight, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, trying to keep her voice professional. "Yes, and please, how many times must I ask you to call me Damien when it's just us?" "At least once more, Mr. Thorne," she replied with a small smile, their usual exchange. "Dinner will be ready at 7. As she turned to leave, he called after her. "Tessa, would you mind joining me for dinner tonight? There's a business matter I'd like to discuss." Her heart skipped again. Of course. The kitchen had become Tessa's sanctuary in the big house. Unlike the rest of the mansion, with its expensive art and antique furniture, the kitchen was warm and practical. As she prepared dinner, a simple but elegant roast chicken with herbs from the garden, she couldn't help wondering what business matter Damien wanted to discuss. Was he unhappy with her work? Was he planning to travel and needed her to manage the house in his absence? Or was it something else entirely? Tessa had never been the type to fantasize about her employer. She'd worked too hard to build a reputation as a professional. But there was something about Damien that made her wonder, the way his eyes lingered on her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, the way he seemed to find reasons to be in whatever room she was working in. "Get a grip, Tessa," she muttered to herself. "He's your boss, nothing more." She'd learned the hard way that letting her guard down only led to disappointment. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew her business, she'd always been the quiet, responsible one, the girl who stayed home to take care of her sick mother while her friends went to college, the girl who worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, the girl who never had time for dating or romance. It wasn't that men hadn't shown interest. They had, but their interest always seemed superficial, focused on her appearance rather than who she was inside. And when they discovered she wasn't experienced, that she'd never been intimate with anyone, they either saw her as a challenge or backed away completely. So she'd focused on work, on building a life for herself. And now, here she was, working for one of the richest men in the city, pretending that her heart didn't race whenever he was near. At exactly 7 o'clock, Tessa placed the final touches on the dining room table. Unlike the formal dining room that could seat 20, Damien preferred to eat in the smaller breakfast nook with its view of the garden. She'd set 2 places, feeling strangely nervous about sharing a meal with him. "Something smells wonderful," Damien said as he entered the room. He'd changed from his business suit into more casual clothes, dark jeans and a grey sweater that made his eyes look even more intense. "Just a simple roast chicken," Tessa replied, trying not to stare at how different he looked in casual clothes. More approachable, more real. "There's nothing simple about your cooking, Tessa. You've spoiled me for restaurant food." They settled into an unexpectedly comfortable dinner. Damien asked her questions about her day, about the book he'd noticed she was reading, about her opinions on the news. It struck Tessa that this was the longest conversation they'd ever had, and it felt surprisingly natural. "You mentioned a business matter," she finally asked as they finished their meal. Damien's expression changed, becoming more serious. "Yes. I've been invited to speak at a technology conference next month in San Francisco. I'll be gone for a week, and I was hoping you might accompany me." Tessa nearly choked on her water. "Accompany you?" "As my personal assistant," he clarified quickly. "The conference is quite demanding, and I'll need someone to manage my schedule, coordinate with my team here, and ensure everything runs smoothly. You're the most organized person I know, and frankly, I trust you more than anyone on my staff." "Oh." Tessa wasn't sure if she felt disappointed or relieved by the clarification. "I've never been to San Francisco." "You've never been anywhere, have you?" Damien asked softly. The question caught her off guard. "What makes you say that?" "I notice things, Tessa. The way you pore over travel magazines when you think no one's watching. How you sometimes stand by the window looking out like you're wondering what's beyond the horizon." She felt exposed, as if he'd somehow seen inside her soul. "I haven't had many opportunities to travel. My mother was sick for a long time before she passed. I couldn't leave her." Damien's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm sorry about your mother. And yes, I know about that too. I make it a point to know the people who work for me." "Is that all I am? Someone who works for you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, and Tessa immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry. That was inappropriate." "No, it wasn't," Damien said, his voice quiet but intense. "And no, that's not all you are." The air between them suddenly felt charged with unspoken words. Tessa looked down at her plate, afraid of what her eyes might reveal if she met his gaze. "So, will you come to San Francisco?" he asked after a moment. "Yes," she said, finally looking up. "I'd be happy to." After dinner, Damien suggested they have coffee in the library. It was Tessa's favorite room in the house, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable leather chairs arranged around a fireplace. Despite the warm spring evening, Damien lit a small fire, explaining that he found the crackling flames soothing. As they settled into the chairs, Tessa couldn't help noticing how different this felt from their usual interactions. Tonight, the line between employer and employee seemed blurred, and she wasn't sure what to make of it. "Tell me something about yourself that's not in your employment file," Damien said, watching her over the rim of his coffee cup. Tessa thought for a moment. "I've never had a real relationship, never even been on a proper date." She immediately felt her cheeks burn. Why had she shared something so personal? But Damien didn't seem surprised or put off by her confession. "Why not? Never met the right person, I guess," she said with a small shrug. "Or maybe I was just too busy taking care of my mom, working, trying to survive. And now? Now I'm still busy working," she said with a smile, trying to lighten the mood. "Is that all you want from life? To work?" The question hit close to home. "No, of course not. I want more. I just haven't figured out how to get it yet." Damien's eyes never left her face. "What's more, Tessa? What do you want that you don't have?" The firelight cast shadows across his face, making him look somehow more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. In that moment, Tessa felt a connection between them that went beyond their roles in this house. "I want to experience life," she said honestly. "I want to see places I've only read about. I want to know what it feels like to be truly wanted, not just for what I look like or what I can do for someone, but for who I am." "And love?" Damien asked softly. "Do you want that too?" "Doesn't everyone?" Damien's expression darkened slightly. "Not everyone is capable of it." "I don't believe that," Tessa said. "I think everyone is capable of love. Some people just build walls to protect themselves from getting hurt." "You're very perceptive," Damien said, setting down his cup. "Is that what you think I've done? Built walls?" Tessa hesitated, aware that she was treading into dangerous territory. "I think you've been hurt before and you're careful now. There's nothing wrong with that. My wife died 5 years ago," Damien said abruptly. "Did you know that?" Tessa shook her head, surprised by the revelation. No, I didn't. Cancer. It was quick at least. She didn't suffer long. His voice was controlled, but Tessa could hear the pain beneath the surface. After she died, I threw myself into work. It was easier than dealing with the emptiness. I'm so sorry, Tessa said, resisting the urge to reach out and touch his hand. Don't be. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand why I've been distant. It's not because I'm incapable of connection. It's because I know how much it hurts when you lose it. Their eyes met across the space between their chairs, and Tessa felt something shift in the atmosphere. The crackling fire, the soft lighting, the personal confessions. It all created a moment of intimacy she hadn't expected. Mr. Thorne. Damien, she corrected herself. Why are you telling me this? He leaned forward slightly. Because I've noticed how you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention, and because I want you to know that the way I look at you when you're not watching, it means something. Tessa's breath caught in her throat. Was this really happening? Was Damien Thorne, her employer, the man she'd secretly been drawn to for months, actually admitting he felt something for her too? I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to say anything, he replied. I just wanted you to know where I stand. I respect you too much to let this remain unspoken between us. Tessa felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost overwhelmed her. In that moment, looking into Damien's eyes, she knew she was falling for him, had been falling for him for months, and for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he was falling for her too. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 10 times, breaking the spell between them. It's getting late, Damien said, standing up. We both have early mornings tomorrow. Tessa stood as well, suddenly unsure of what was expected of her. Thank you for dinner, and for sharing with me. Thank you for listening, he replied. And Tessa, I meant what I said about San Francisco. I'd really like you to come with me. I'll be there, she promised. As she walked back to her quarters in the east wing of the house, Tessa's mind was spinning. Tonight had changed something fundamental between them. The carefully maintained professional relationship had shifted, revealing possibilities she'd barely allowed herself to imagine. In her room, she sat at the window seat, looking out at the moonlit garden below. The night was clear, the stars bright above the manicured grounds of the estate. For the first time in years, Tessa felt hope blooming in her chest. Hope for something more than just survival, more than just existing day to day. She thought about Damien's revelation about his wife, about the pain he'd carried alone all these years. She thought about the way he looked at her, the way he'd noticed things about her that no one else ever had. And as she finally prepared for bed, one thought kept circling in her mind. What would happen in San Francisco? Would this fragile connection between them grow stronger, away from the roles they played in this house? Or would Damien retreat back behind his walls once they returned? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Something had awakened in Tessa tonight, something she couldn't ignore. For the first time in her life, she was willing to take a risk, to open her heart to the possibility of love, even if it meant facing the chance of pain. Because Damien Thorne was the first man who had ever made her feel truly seen, and that, she was beginning to realize, was worth fighting for. The flight to San Francisco was Tessa's first time on a plane. She tried to hide her nervousness as they boarded Damien's private jet, but her white-knuckle grip on the armrest gave her away. First flight? Damien asked gently, taking the seat beside her. Tessa nodded, embarrassed. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention. He covered her hand with his own. It's perfectly normal to be nervous, but I promise, we'll be fine. The warmth of his touch sent tingles up her arm. Over the past 2 weeks since their conversation in the library, something had shifted between them. Damien sought out her company more often, asking her opinion on business matters, inviting her to join him for meals, suggesting evening walks through the garden. Each interaction felt charged with unspoken feelings, yet neither of them had crossed the invisible line that still separated employer from employee. I've never seen clouds from above, Tessa admitted as the plane took off, her anxiety giving way to wonder as they climbed through the fluffy white expanse. They're beautiful. Damien watched her face, a small smile playing at his lips. Yes, they are. The luxury hotel suite Damien had booked for them in San Francisco had 2 separate bedrooms with a shared living area. Tessa stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, taking in the breathtaking view of the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. Do you like it? Damien asked, coming to stand beside her. It's incredible, she breathed. I've only seen this in pictures. The conference doesn't start until tomorrow afternoon. Why don't we do some sightseeing in the morning? I could show you around the city." Tessa turned to him in surprise. "Don't you have meetings to prepare for?" "Nothing that can't wait. This is your first time in San Francisco. You should experience it properly." The next morning, they rode a cable car up the steep hills of the city, visited Fisherman's Wharf and walked along the waterfront. Tessa couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so carefree, so alive. Damien was different here too, more relaxed, smiling more often, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back as he guided her through crowded areas. "What do you think of San Francisco so far?" he asked, as they stopped for coffee at a small cafe. "It's magical," Tessa replied honestly. "Thank you for bringing me." "Thank you for coming," he said, his eyes serious. "I wouldn't want to be here with anyone else." The technology conference was held at a massive convention center downtown. Tessa quickly fell into her role as Damien's assistant, managing his schedule, coordinating with his team back home, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. She was impressed by how different he was in this professional setting, commanding, confident, the undisputed expert in his field. After his keynote speech on the second day, the conference hall erupted in applause. Tessa, standing at the back of the room, felt a surge of pride watching him. "Your boss is quite impressive," said a woman who had appeared beside her, elegant in an expensive designer suit. "I'm Elaine Prescott, Vanguard Technologies." "Tessa Blake," she replied, shaking the woman's offered hand. "And yes, he is." Elaine gave her an appraising look. "And you're his assistant," Tessa supplied, though the word felt inadequate for what had been developing between them. "Really?" Elaine raised an eyebrow. "The way he looks at you suggests something more than a professional relationship." Before Tessa could respond, Damien approached them, his expression warming when he saw her. "Tessa, there you are." "Elaine, good to see you again." He nodded politely to the other woman, but his attention quickly returned to Tessa. "Ready for lunch?" As they walked away, Tessa could feel Elaine's eyes on them. "She seems to know you well," she commented. "We dated briefly a few years ago," Damien replied, his tone matter of fact. "It didn't work out." Tessa felt an unexpected pang of jealousy at the thought of Damien with the sophisticated businesswoman. "She's very beautiful." Damien stopped walking and turned to face her. "Yes, she is, but beauty isn't what I'm looking for anymore." "What are you looking for?" Tessa asked, before she could stop herself. His eyes held hers. "Someone real. Someone who sees me, not my money or my position. Someone who brings light into a room just by being in it." Tessa's heart hammered in her chest. Was he talking about her? The moment was interrupted by a conference attendee approaching to ask Damien a question about his speech. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and networking events. That evening, they were invited to a cocktail reception at a rooftop bar overlooking the city. Tessa had brought only one formal outfit, a simple black dress that she hoped would be appropriate. When she emerged from her bedroom into their shared living area, Damien's reaction told her she had nothing to worry about. He stared at her, his eyes taking in the way the dress hugged her curves, the way her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "You look stunning," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "Is it appropriate for the reception?" "More than appropriate. You'll be the most beautiful woman there." The reception was crowded with tech industry elite, all vying for Damien's attention. Tessa stayed by his side, making notes when necessary, reminding him of people's names, smoothly managing the flow of conversations. She noticed several women eyeing him with interest, and more than a few giving her curious, sometimes envious glances. "You're very good at this," Damien murmured to her during a rare, quiet moment. "Everyone is impressed by you." "By me? I'm just doing my job." "No, you're doing much more than that. You have a natural grace that puts people at ease. You remember everyone's names, their interests, their connections. You've made more meaningful contacts tonight than most people do in a year of networking." His praise warmed her. "I just pay attention to people. Most folks just want to be heard and remembered." "See? That kind of insight is rare." He touched her arm lightly. "Would you like to get some air? It's getting crowded in here." They stepped out onto the terrace where the cool night air was a welcome relief from the stuffy reception. The city lights sparkled below them, and the moon hung low over the bay. "It's so beautiful," Tessa said, leaning against the railing. "I never imagined I'd see something like this." Damien stood close beside her, their arms almost touching. "There's a whole world out there, Tessa. Places more beautiful than this. I'd like to show them to you someday." She turned to look at him, her heart in her throat. "Why me?" Why not someone like Elaine, someone from your world? Because you see beauty in things others take for granted, he said simply. Because when you smile, it's real. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to pretend to be someone I'm not. A strand of hair blew across her face, and Damien gently tucked it behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Tessa felt herself leaning into his touch, drawn to him by a force she couldn't resist. "Damien," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the city below. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. His eyes dropped to her lips, and he moved imperceptibly closer. But then someone called his name from the doorway, and the moment was broken. "Mr. Thorne, the CEO of Nexus Tech was hoping to speak with you before he leaves." Damien stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Of course, we'll be right there." The rest of the conference passed quickly. During the day they maintained their professional roles, Damien the brilliant tech innovator, Tessa his capable assistant. But in the evenings they explored the city together, discovering hidden restaurants, walking along the beach at sunset, talking for hours about everything and nothing. On their last night in San Francisco, Damien surprised her with dinner reservations at an exclusive restaurant atop one of the city's tallest buildings. The table was secluded, with breathtaking views of the city lights. A bottle of expensive champagne was already chilling when they arrived. "What are we celebrating?" Tessa asked as the waiter poured their champagne. "A successful conference," Damien replied, lifting his glass in a toast. "And the pleasure of your company this week." Tessa clinked her glass against his, feeling a bittersweet pang at the thought that tomorrow they would return to Boston, to the mansion, to their normal roles. "It's been a wonderful week." "It has," he agreed. "You've been extraordinary, Tessa, not just as my assistant, but as my companion." There was that word, companion. Not employee, not staff, companion. Tessa's heart fluttered with hope. "I've enjoyed every minute," she said honestly. Damien reached across the table to take her hand. "I don't want things to go back to the way they were before." "What do you mean?" "When we return home," he paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I want to continue spending time with you, not as your employer, but as—" "As what?" Tessa prompted when he hesitated. "As a man who cares deeply for you," he finished, his eyes never leaving hers. Tessa felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such sincerity, such openness. "I care for you too," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "More than I should, probably." Damien's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "There's no should about feelings, Tessa. They simply are." After dinner, they walked back to their hotel, taking the long route along the waterfront. The night was clear and cool, the moon casting a silver path across the bay. When Damien took her hand, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Back at the hotel suite, they stood awkwardly in the living area, neither wanting the evening to end. "Would you like a nightcap?" Damien offered, gesturing to the well-stocked bar. "Just water for me, thank you," Tessa replied, suddenly nervous about where the night might lead. They settled on the sofa, a respectable distance between them, but the air was charged with unspoken desires. Damien had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Do you know what struck me most about you when we first met?" he asked, turning slightly to face her. Tessa shook her head. "Your eyes," he said. "They were so honest, so direct." "In my world, that's rare. Most people I meet have an agenda, something they want from me. But you just looked at me like I was a regular person." "You are a regular person," Tessa said with a small smile. "Just one with an irregular bank account." Damien laughed, a genuine sound that made her heart swell. "That's exactly what I mean. You see me, not my money or my position." "And you see me," Tessa replied softly. "Not just the housekeeper, not just someone who works for you." "I see so much more than that," he confirmed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The space between them seemed to shrink, the air growing thick with tension. Damien reached out to touch her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with exquisite gentleness. Tessa's eyes fluttered closed at the contact, her body leaning instinctively toward his. When his lips finally met hers, it was soft, questioning, a first kiss that asked permission even as it was given. Tessa responded with all the longing she'd been holding back for months, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, where she could feel his heart racing as fast as her own. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding. Damien's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. Tessa felt herself melting into him, all reason giving way to desire, Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, Damien pulled back, his breathing ragged. "Tessa, wait. We should slow down." Confusion and hurt flashed across her face. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, God, no," he said quickly, taking her hands in his. "That was incredible. You're incredible. But I don't want to rush this. You're too important to me." Relief flooded through her. "I thought maybe you didn't want—" "I want," he interrupted, his voice rough with barely controlled desire. "Believe me, I want. But I respect you too much to let this happen like this when we're both caught up in the moment." Tessa nodded, understanding even as her body hummed with disappointment. "You're right, we should be sure." Damien brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles softly. "When this happens between us, and I very much hope it will, I want it to be perfect for you. No regrets, no second thoughts." "Thank you," she whispered, touched by his consideration, "for being patient, for caring about what I want. Always," he promised. "Now it's late, and we have an early flight tomorrow. We should probably say goodnight." Though every part of her wanted to stay with him, to continue what they'd started, Tessa knew he was right. This wasn't the time or place for such a significant step, so she nodded and stood up, reluctantly pulling her hands from his. "Good night, Damien," she said, lingering at the door to her bedroom. "Good night, Tessa," he replied, his eyes telling her everything his words couldn't. The flight home the next day was charged with new awareness between them. Small touches, shared glances, private smiles, all evidence of the shift in their relationship. But by unspoken agreement, they maintained a professional distance in public, aware of the watchful eyes of Damien's staff when they arrived back at the mansion. Life at the Thorne estate fell into a new pattern. During the day they kept up appearances, Tessa the efficient housekeeper, Damien the focused businessman. But in the evenings, they sought each other's company. Sometimes they dined together, sometimes they walked in the garden, sometimes they simply sat in the library, reading in comfortable silence. And sometimes, when the moment was right, they shared kisses that grew increasingly passionate, increasingly difficult to break away from. Yet Damien always pulled back before things went too far, always ensuring Tessa was comfortable with each new step in their evolving relationship. 2 weeks after their return from San Francisco, a spring storm raged outside the mansion. Thunder rattled the windows, and lightning illuminated the night sky in brilliant flashes. Tessa sat in the library, a book open but unread in her lap, as she watched the storm through the tall windows. "Penny for your thoughts," Damien said as he entered the room, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," she admitted, accepting the mug with a grateful smile. "A few months ago I was desperate for work, and now—" "And now?" he prompted, sitting beside her on the window seat. "Now I'm here, with you, feeling things I never thought I'd feel." Damien's eyes darkened. "What things?" Tessa set her mug aside, gathering her courage. "Happiness, hope, desire." She paused, her heart pounding. "Love." The word hung between them, powerful and fragile all at once. Damien set his own mug down and took her hands in his. "Tessa," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" She nodded, unable to find more words, her eyes revealing everything her voice couldn't express. Damien pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she was something precious, something he feared might break or disappear if he held too tightly. "I never thought I'd feel this way again after losing Sarah," he confessed, referring to his late wife. "I'd resigned myself to being alone. And then you came into my life and everything changed. I was so afraid you wouldn't feel the same," Tessa whispered against his chest, "that I was just imagining the connection between us." He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "It's real, Tessa. So real it terrifies me sometimes." Another crack of thunder shook the house, and the lights flickered before going out completely. The room was plunged into darkness, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning and the dim glow of the dying fire in the fireplace. "Stay here," Damien said, releasing her to add another log to the fire and light several candles placed around the room. The warm, flickering light created an intimate atmosphere, casting long shadows on the walls. When he returned to her side, Tessa felt a surge of courage. The storm, the candlelight, the confession of feelings, it all combined to create a moment that felt separate from normal life, a bubble of time where anything was possible. "Damien," she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the rain against the windows, "there's something I need to tell you." He sat beside her again, his expression serious. "You can tell me anything." "I've never been with anyone before," she admitted, her cheeks flushing in the dim light. Not in that way. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Tessa, that doesn't change how I feel about you. I know, she said quickly, but I wanted you to know because… She took a deep breath, gathering all her courage. You're the only man who's ever made me feel safe enough to want this. So if you'll have me, I want you to be my first. The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Tessa watched Damien's face, her heart hammering in her chest, waiting for his response. Damien froze, his body going completely still. For a long moment he simply stared at her, a storm of emotions crossing his face. The air thickened with tension as the silence stretched between them. Then, to Tessa's confusion and growing dismay, he stood up, and without a word he walked away. Not cruelly, not coldly, just broken, leaving Tessa alone in the flickering candlelight, the sound of the storm outside matching the turmoil in her heart. The morning after the storm brought clear skies and sunshine, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Tessa's heart. She moved through her duties mechanically, her mind replaying the moment Damien had walked away from her. The hurt and humiliation felt like a physical ache in her chest. Had she misread everything? Had the connection between them been only in her imagination? The questions circled endlessly in her mind as she dusted furniture that didn't need dusting and reorganized pantry shelves that were already perfectly arranged. When she heard Damien's office door open, she quickly ducked into the laundry room, not ready to face him yet. Through the partially open door, she watched him walk down the hallway, his shoulders tense, his expression distant. He didn't look like a man who had just rejected someone he cared about. He looked like a man carrying a burden too heavy to bear alone. The pattern continued for 3 days. Damien left early for work and returned late. When their paths did cross, he was polite but remote, his eyes never quite meeting hers. The warmth and intimacy they had shared seemed like a dream now, replaced by a cold formality that hurt worse than if he'd simply fired her. On the 4th day, Tessa found a note slipped under her door when she woke up. Please meet me in the rose garden at noon. We need to talk. D. Her hands trembled as she read the short message. Was this it? Was he going to ask her to leave? Had she made things so uncomfortable that he couldn't even bear to have her in his house anymore? By noon, Tessa had worked herself into a state of near panic. She changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple sundress, wanting to look her best even if this was goodbye. The rose garden was Damien's pride and joy, a secluded corner of the estate where he often went to think. She found him sitting on a stone bench, staring at a particularly beautiful white rose. You wanted to see me, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Damien looked up, and the expression in his eyes wasn't what she had expected. Not anger or disgust or even pity, but a deep, profound sadness. Tessa, he said softly, standing up. Thank you for coming. She remained where she was, afraid to move closer. Are you going to ask me to leave? Surprise crossed his face. Leave? God, no. Is that what you thought? What was I supposed to think? The words came out sharper than she intended. You walked away from me without a word, and then you avoided me for days. Damien ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd rarely seen from him. I know I handled it badly, I'm sorry. Why did you do it? Tessa asked, the question that had been burning inside her finally escaping. Was it something I said? Something I did? No, he said quickly. It wasn't you. It was never you. He gestured to the bench. Please, sit with me. Let me try to explain. After a moment's hesitation, she joined him, maintaining a careful distance between them. When you said that to me, Damien began, his voice low and intense, it wasn't desire I felt, it was grief. Grief? Tessa repeated, confused. Yes, he turned to face her fully, because I realized no one ever taught you that your worth doesn't begin and end with what you give away. Tessa stared at him, trying to understand what he was saying. I saw it in your eyes, he continued. This belief that offering yourself to me was what I wanted, what I was waiting for. As if that was the currency you needed to pay to keep me interested. That's not… She started to protest but stopped herself. Wasn't there some truth in what he was saying? Hadn't she always felt that her inexperience was something that made her less desirable, less worthy of love? I want you, Damien said, his voice rough with emotion. But not like that. Not then. I want your heart awake. I want your love without the weight of proving anything. Tears filled Tessa's eyes as his words struck a chord deep within her. I don't know what that means, she admitted. Damien reached for her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she let him take it. It means I care about you too much, to let your first time be about gratitude or obligation or fear of losing me. It means I want you to be sure, really sure, that it's what you want, not what you think I want. I thought, Tessa struggled to find the words. I thought men always wanted that they'd take what was offered without question. Some men, maybe, Damien acknowledged, but not me, not with you. He squeezed her hand gently. You're too important to me. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over. I was so embarrassed. I thought you didn't want me. Oh, Tessa. Damien moved closer, cautiously putting his arm around her shoulders. I want you in ways I can barely express, but I want all of you. Your mind, your heart, your trust, the physical part. That can wait until you're ready. Really ready. She leaned into him, the hurt of the past few days beginning to ease. I've spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't enough, she confessed, the words pouring out of her. Not pretty enough, not experienced enough, not worldly enough, always lacking in some way. You've never been lacking, Damien said firmly. Not to me. Tessa looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to be with someone, how to trust that they won't eventually get tired of me and leave. I don't know either, he said with a small smile. It's been a long time since I let anyone close, but maybe we can figure it out together. Slowly, no pressure. For the first time in days, Tessa felt hope returning. I'd like that. Damien stood up, pulling her gently to her feet. Good, because I've made reservations for dinner tonight at that little Italian place in town you mentioned. You've always wanted to try. Consider it our first real date. The weeks that followed were a revelation for Tessa. True to his word, Damien took things slowly, courting her with a patience and consideration she'd never experienced before. They had dinner at small, intimate restaurants where he held her hand across the table. They visited art galleries and museums where he listened attentively to her opinions and impressions. They walked along the beach at sunset, talking about everything and nothing, and through it all, he never pressured her, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Their kisses became more passionate, their embraces more intimate, but Damien always followed her lead, always stopped when she hesitated. One evening, after they'd attended a concert in the park, Tessa found the courage to ask him a question that had been on her mind. Aren't you frustrated, waiting for me like this? Damien considered her question seriously. Not frustrated. Anticipatory, maybe. He smiled at her. But some things are worth waiting for. Most men wouldn't be so patient, she pointed out. I'm not most men, he replied. And you're not most women. He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. This isn't just about physical desire, Tessa. It's about building something real between us, something that will last. Those words echoed in her mind later that night as she lay in bed, thinking about how much her life had changed in such a short time. From lonely housekeeper to the object of Damien Thorne's devotion, it still seemed unreal sometimes. Yet it wasn't just the external changes that amazed her. It was the internal ones too. The way she stood taller now, spoke more confidently, believed in her own worth in a way she never had before. Damien hadn't just offered her his heart, he'd helped her find her own strength. One rainy Saturday, they spent the afternoon in the library, a fire crackling in the fireplace despite the late spring weather. Tessa was curled up on the sofa with a book when Damien sat down beside her, a serious expression on his face. There's something I want to ask you, he said. Tessa marked her place and set the book aside. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just important. He took her hand. I've been thinking about us, about the future. Her heart skipped a beat. Oh, my company is having its annual charity gala next month, he said. It's a big event. Board members, investors, industry leaders, everyone will be there. And you want me to help organize it? Tessa asked, slightly confused by the direction of the conversation. Damien smiled. No. I want you to attend it. With me. As my partner. Tessa's eyes widened. Your partner? You mean you want to make our relationship public? Yes, he said simply. I'm tired of hiding how I feel about you. I want the world to know that you're the woman I love. Love. He'd said it before, but never so directly, never with such certainty. Tessa felt a surge of joy so powerful, it left her breathless. People will talk, she said, knowing how the elite social circles of Boston operated. They'll say all sorts of things about the millionaire and his housekeeper. Let them, Damien replied, unconcerned. What matters is us, what we know to be true. Tessa thought about it, trying to imagine herself at a glittering society event, surrounded by wealthy, sophisticated people. The idea was terrifying, and yet, With Damien by her side, not impossible. Okay, she agreed. I'll go with you. But I have nothing to wear to something like that. Damien's smile widened. I thought you might say that, which is why I've arranged for a personal shopper to meet us tomorrow in the city. Whatever you want, it's yours. Damien, that's too much. It's not nearly enough, he interrupted gently. Please let me do this for you. Not because I think you need to change or be someone you're not, but because I want you to feel comfortable and confident. Put that way, Tessa couldn't refuse. Thank you, she said softly. One more thing, Damien added, looking slightly nervous now. The gala is in New York. I thought we might make a week of it. See the sights, take in a Broadway show, enjoy the city. What do you think? A week in New York? Tessa couldn't hide her excitement. I've always wanted to go there. I know, Damien said with a smile. You mentioned it once, months ago. I remembered. The fact that he had noticed, had remembered such a small detail, touched her deeply. You're an amazing man, Damien Thorne. Only because you bring out the best in me, he replied, pulling her into his arms. The shopping trip the next day was both overwhelming and exhilarating. The personal shopper, a stylish woman named Vivian, took them to exclusive boutiques that Tessa would never have dared enter on her own. Damien sat patiently in each one, offering his opinion when asked, but mostly just watching with evident pleasure as Tessa tried on beautiful clothes. What do you think of this one? She asked, emerging from a dressing room in a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves before flowing out in a dramatic skirt. Damien's eyes darkened as he took in the sight of her. You look breathtaking, he said, his voice rough. Vivian clapped her hands in approval. This is definitely the one for the gala. You'll be the most beautiful woman there. Tessa turned to look at herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the confident, elegant woman reflected back at her. It is beautiful, she agreed. But are you sure it's not too much? She asked Damien, aware of the price tag she'd glimpsed. Nothing is too much for you, he replied, coming to stand behind her. Their eyes met in the mirror, and the love she saw in his made her heart swell. By the end of the day, Tessa had a complete wardrobe for their New York trip. Elegant dresses for evening events, stylish casual wear for sightseeing, even delicate lingerie that made her blush when Damien insisted she deserved beautiful things that no one else would see. As they drove home, Tessa's head resting against Damien's shoulder, she felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. Thank you, she said softly, not just for the clothes, but for everything. For showing me a world I never thought I'd be part of. The world is better with you in it, Damien replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I'm just fortunate enough to be the one showing it to you. The week before their New York trip, Tessa noticed Damien growing increasingly preoccupied. He spent long hours in his office, taking phone calls behind closed doors, frowning at his computer screen. When she asked if everything was all right, he assured her it was just work stress, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. Then, 3 days before they were due to leave, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. She was bringing coffee to Damien's office when she heard him speaking tensely to someone on the phone. I don't care what it takes, I need those records, he was saying. If she finds out about this before I have a chance to explain... There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. Yes, I know it's a risk, but I love her, I need to make this right. Her. He was talking about a woman, about love. Tessa froze outside the door, the coffee tray trembling in her hands. Just handle it, Mark. Get me those documents before we leave for New York. Tessa backed away quietly, her mind racing. What documents? What was Damien hiding? And who was the woman he loved? Had everything between them been a lie? She returned to the kitchen in a daze, setting down the coffee tray with shaking hands. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately, to demand answers. But another part, the insecure girl who had never felt good enough, whispered that she'd been a fool to believe someone like Damien Thorne could truly love someone like her. For the rest of the day, Tessa moved through her duties like a ghost, her thoughts a chaotic jumble of suspicion and hurt. When Damien joined her for dinner that evening, she couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes, afraid of what she might see, or worse, what she might not see. Tessa? Damien's voice broke through her thoughts. Is everything all right? You've barely touched your food. I'm fine, she lied, pushing pasta around her plate. Just not very hungry tonight. Damien studied her face. You don't seem fine. Did something happen today? The concern in his voice almost broke her resolve. How could he sound so sincere if he was hiding something from her, unless he was an even better actor than she'd realized? Nothing happened, she said, finally looking up at him. I'm just tired. Damien didn't look convinced, but he didn't press further. If you're sure. I thought we might go over the itinerary for New York tonight, but if you're tired, it can wait until tomorrow. That's fine, Tessa replied, forcing a small smile. Tomorrow would be better. Later, alone in her room, Tessa stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what she'd overheard. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe the she Damien had referred to wasn't a lover, but a business associate or a relative. Maybe the documents were completely innocent, but the doubt had taken root, and she couldn't shake it. After everything they'd shared, after all the ways he'd shown her she could trust him, why would he be keeping secrets now? The next morning, Tessa made a decision. She would confront Damien directly. If there was an explanation, she deserved to hear it, and if he was hiding something, better to know now than to continue living in a fantasy. She found him in his study, bent over a stack of papers. When she knocked on the open door, he looked up with a smile that faded when he saw her serious expression. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. Damien set down his pen. "That sounds ominous." "Yesterday," Tessa began, forcing herself to meet his gaze, "I overheard part of your phone conversation with Mark." Damien went very still. "I see. You were talking about some documents, about a woman you love, about making something right before she finds out." The words tumbled out, her voice shaking slightly. "If there's someone else, if this has all been some kind of game to you—" "Tessa, no," Damien interrupted, standing up quickly. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" she demanded. "Because from where I'm standing it sounds like you've been lying to me." Damien ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "I haven't lied to you. Not exactly. I just haven't told you everything." "That's the same thing," Tessa insisted, hurt making her voice sharp. "Please sit down," Damien said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Let me explain." After a moment's hesitation, Tessa sat, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm listening." Damien took a deep breath. "The woman I was talking about is you, Tessa. The documents Mark is trying to get for me. They're related to my past, something I needed to resolve before taking our relationship further." "Your past?" Tessa repeated, confused. "What about your past?" Damien sat on the edge of his desk, closer to her now. "Before I met Sarah, my late wife, I was engaged to someone else, Christina Westfield, the daughter of my father's business partner." Tessa remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "It wasn't a love match," Damien explained, "more of a business arrangement. Our fathers wanted to merge their companies, and our engagement was part of the deal. I wasn't happy about it, but I went along with it because that's what was expected of me." "What happened?" Tessa asked, her anger beginning to give way to curiosity. "I met Sarah," Damien said simply, "and for the first time in my life, I knew what real love felt like. I broke off the engagement with Christina, which caused a huge scandal and nearly ruined the business deal. My father was furious. Christina's father was humiliated, and Christina, she swore she'd make me pay someday." "And now," Tessa prompted. Damien's expression grew troubled. "Now Christina's father has died and she's taken over his company. She's on the board of the charity hosting the gala in New York, and from what Mark has told me, she's been spreading rumors about me, about us." "What kind of rumors?" "That I make a habit of seducing my staff, that I did the same thing with Sarah, who was my father's secretary before we fell in love." Damien's eyes held hers. "None of it's true, of course. But Christina is powerful and influential. Her words carry weight." Tessa felt a chill. "So the documents, financial records proving that Christina has been embezzling from her father's company for years," Damien explained. "Insurance, in case she tries to cause trouble for us at the gala. I didn't want to tell you about any of this because I didn't want to worry you. I wanted our first trip to New York to be perfect." Relief washed over Tessa, followed quickly by shame for having doubted him. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have trusted you." Damien moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "No, I'm the one who should apologize. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. No more secrets between us, I promise." Tessa searched his eyes and found only sincerity. "No more secrets," she agreed. Damien smiled, reaching up to touch her face. "Now can we please go back to being excited about New York? I've made some special arrangements that I think you're going to love." The tension between them dissolved, replaced by the warm connection that had become so precious to them both. As Damien pulled her into his arms, Tessa realized that this was what real love felt like, not perfect or without challenges, but honest and resilient. And for the first time in her life, She felt truly worthy of it. New York City was everything Tessa had dreamed of and more. From the moment their private car entered Manhattan, she couldn't stop staring out the window at the towering skyscrapers, the bustling crowds, the endless energy of the city. "It's overwhelming," she said as they pulled up to their hotel, a luxury establishment in the heart of Manhattan. Damien squeezed her hand. "In a good way, I hope." "In the best way," she assured him, her eyes shining with excitement. The hotel suite was larger than Tessa's entire apartment had been before she came to work for Damien. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, and fresh flowers had been arranged throughout the rooms. A bottle of champagne waited on ice with a note welcoming Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. "They think we're married," Tessa said with a small laugh, showing Damien the card. Something flickered in his eyes, too quick for her to read. "An understandable mistake," he said lightly. "I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable." "Not at all," she replied honestly. So much had changed between them in the past few months that the idea of being Damien's wife didn't seem as far-fetched as it once might have. Their days in New York were filled with all the experiences Tessa had only read about in books or seen in movies. They walked through Central Park, visited the Metropolitan Museum of Art, took a ferry to the Statue of Liberty, and shopped on Fifth Avenue. Each evening brought a new adventure: dinner at an exclusive restaurant, tickets to a Broadway show, a jazz club in Harlem. Through it all, Damien was attentive and patient, never showing any sign of boredom as Tessa marveled at sights that were probably commonplace to him. If anything, he seemed to enjoy the city more through her eyes, finding fresh wonder in familiar places. The night before the gala, he took her to the top of the Empire State Building. The city spread out below them, a glittering tapestry of lights in the darkness. "It's like standing on top of the world," Tessa said, her arms wrapped around herself against the cool evening breeze. Damien stood behind her, encircling her with his warmth. "I want to give you the world, Tessa," he said softly against her ear. "Everything you've missed, everything you've dreamed of. I want you to have it all." She turned in his arms to face him. "I already have everything I need," she told him. "You've shown me that I don't need fancy clothes or expensive trips to be happy. I just need to be seen for who I really am. And you see me, Damien, better than anyone ever has." His eyes darkened with emotion as he pulled her closer. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied, the words coming easily now, natural as breathing. Their kiss was deep and tender, a promise of things to come. When they finally broke apart, Tessa rested her head against Damien's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. "About meeting Christina?" Tessa considered the question. A month ago, even a week ago, the thought of facing Damien's vindictive ex-fiancé would have terrified her. But now, secure in his love and her own worth, she found the prospect more annoying than frightening. "No," she said with quiet confidence, "I'm not worried about Christina or anyone else who might disapprove of us. What we have is real. Nothing can change that." Damien's arms tightened around her. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," she replied with a smile. The morning of the gala, Tessa woke to find Damien already up, sitting at the desk in their suite, frowning at his laptop. "Everything okay?" she asked, stretching lazily. He looked up, his expression clearing at the sight of her. "Everything's fine. Mark sent over those documents we discussed, just in case." "Do you really think Christina will try something tonight?" Tessa asked, coming to stand behind him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. Damien sighed, reaching up to cover one of her hands with his own. "I hope not. But she's always been vindictive, and she's had years to nurture her grudge against me. I want to be prepared." "We'll face her together," Tessa assured him, dropping a kiss on the top of his head. "Now, what's the plan for today? The gala doesn't start until 7, right?" Damien closed his laptop and turned to her with a smile. "I thought we might have a lazy morning in the hotel, then lunch at that little cafe you liked yesterday. After that," his smile widened mysteriously, "I have a surprise for you." After a leisurely breakfast and lunch, Damien led Tessa to a discreet salon, tucked away on a side street in the East Village. "I've arranged for you to be pampered today," he explained. "Hair, makeup, everything you need to get ready for tonight." Tessa's eyes widened. "Damien, you didn't have to—" "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Not because you need any of it, you're beautiful just as you are, but because every woman deserves to feel special sometimes." Inside, Tessa was greeted by a team of stylists who treated her like royalty, offering champagne and strawberries as they worked their magic. For 3 hours, she was massaged, polished, coiffed, and made up with expert hands. When they finally turned her to face the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her hair had been swept up in an elegant updo, with a few soft tendrils framing her face. Her makeup was subtle but striking, enhancing her natural beauty rather than masking it, and she felt relaxed and refreshed, every muscle in her body loose and warm. "You look stunning," said the head stylist, beaming with pride at her handiwork. "Your husband is going to be speechless." Tessa didn't bother to correct the assumption. Instead, she thanked the team warmly before being escorted to a waiting car where Damien had arranged for her dress and accessories to be delivered. Back at the hotel, Tessa found herself growing nervous as the time to leave approached. She stood in front of the mirror in the bedroom, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her midnight blue gown, adjusting the delicate diamond necklace Damien had surprised her with as an early birthday present. "Are you ready?" Damien called from the living room of their suite. "The car is waiting." Taking a deep breath, Tessa stepped out of the bedroom. The look on Damien's face made any lingering doubts vanish instantly. He stared at her, completely still, his eyes moving slowly from her face to her gown and back again. "You are absolutely breathtaking," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Tessa felt a blush warm her cheeks. "You look pretty good yourself," she replied. And he did, devastatingly handsome in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair styled just right, his eyes never leaving her face. "Shall we?" he asked, offering his arm. "Let's go knock their socks off," Tessa said with newfound confidence. The charity gala was being held at one of New York's most prestigious hotels, in a ballroom that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, all dressed in their finest. A string quartet played softly in one corner, and uniformed waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. As they entered, Tessa felt many eyes turn in their direction. She straightened her spine, keeping her chin up and her hand firmly on Damien's arm. These people might have more money, more social standing, more experience in this world than she did, but she refused to feel inferior. Damien had chosen her, and that was all that mattered. "Damien, so good to see you," called a distinguished-looking older man, approaching them with a warm smile. "And this must be the lovely Tessa we've heard so much about." "George, wonderful to see you too," Damien replied, shaking the man's hand. "Yes, this is Tessa Blake. Tessa, this is George Harrison, chairman of the board and an old friend of my father's." Tessa offered her hand with a genuine smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Harrison." "Please call me George," the older man insisted, taking her hand in both of his. "Any woman who can put that look in Damien's eyes is a friend of mine. He hasn't looked this happy in years." The warmth of George's welcome set the tone for much of the evening. Most of Damien's colleagues and business associates were welcoming and curious about the woman who had captured the heart of Boston's most eligible bachelor. A few cast sideways glances or whispered behind their hands, but Tessa found she didn't care. Their opinions couldn't touch the happiness she felt. It was nearly an hour into the event when Tessa noticed a striking blonde woman making her way determinedly toward them. The woman's beauty was undeniable, but there was a hardness to her features, a calculating gleam in her eye that put Tessa immediately on guard. "Christina," Damien murmured, his body tensing beside her. "Remember, whatever she says, she's trying to provoke a reaction. Don't give her the satisfaction." Tessa squeezed his arm reassuringly. "I'll be fine." "Damien," the blonde woman said as she reached them, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How lovely to see you again after all this time." Her eyes flickered dismissively over Tessa. "And this must be your housekeeper, was it? How modern of you to bring your staff to such an event." Tessa felt Damien stiffen beside her, but before he could respond, she stepped forward slightly. "Tessa Blake," she said pleasantly, extending her hand. "And yes, I was Damien's housekeeper. Now I'm the woman he loves. Life takes such interesting turns, doesn't it?" Christina's smile froze, her eyes narrowing slightly as she ignored Tessa's outstretched hand. "Indeed it does, though in my experience, Damien's affections tend to be rather fleeting, especially when it comes to women in service positions." "Christina," Damien's voice was low but sharp with warning, "that's enough." "Oh, I'm just making conversation," Christina replied innocently, "sharing my observations as someone who's known you for years." She turned back to Tessa. "Did he tell you about Sarah, his wife? She was his father's secretary before she caught his eye. Poor thing didn't last long once the novelty wore off." "Sarah died of cancer," Damien said, anger now evident in his tone. "As you well know." Of course," Christina said, waving a dismissive hand. "Such a tragedy. but it did leave you free to pursue your interests with the household staff. Tessa felt a flash of anger, not for herself but for Damien and the memory of his wife. She was about to respond when she felt a gentle pressure on her arm. Turning, she saw George Harrison standing beside them, his expression stern as he looked at Christina. "Ms. Westfield," he said coldly, "I believe your presence is required at the donor recognition table. And may I remind you that as a board member, your behavior reflects on the charity as a whole." Christina's face flushed, but she recovered quickly, plastering on a brittle smile. "Of course, George. I was just welcoming an old friend." She shot one last venomous look at Damien and Tessa before turning on her heel and walking away. "I apologize for that," George said once she was out of earshot. "Christina's position on the board was her father's last request before he passed. We tolerate her for his sake, but her behavior tonight was inexcusable." "Thank you for the rescue," Damien said, visibly relaxing, "though I think Tessa was handling herself quite well." George smiled at Tessa with new respect. "I have no doubt of that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should make sure she's not poisoning any other wells tonight." As he walked away, Damien turned to Tessa with concern. "Are you all right? Christina can be particularly vicious when she wants to be." To his evident surprise, Tessa laughed. "Is that the worst she can do? Imply that you have a type? That you fall for women who work for you?" She shook her head. "I expected something much more dramatic from the way you described her." Damien stared at her for a moment before breaking into a grin. "You are remarkable, you know that? Most women would be upset, or at least rattled. A month ago, I probably would have been," Tessa admitted. "But now, I know who I am, and I know what we have. Some bitter woman's insinuations can't touch that." Damien's expression softened into something that made Tessa's heart skip a beat. "Have I told you lately how much I love you? You could stand to mention it more often," she teased. He pulled her closer, not caring who might be watching. "I love you, Tessa Blake, more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," she replied softly. "Now, I believe you promised me a dance." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of dancing, champagne, and laughter. Christina made no further attempts to approach them, though Tessa occasionally caught her watching them with barely concealed fury. It was nearly midnight when they finally returned to their hotel, tired but happy. "You were amazing tonight," Damien said as they entered their suite. "Everyone was charmed by you." "Even Christina?" Tessa asked with a small smile as she slipped off her high heels with a sigh of relief. Damien laughed. "Especially Christina. She hates to be upstaged, and you definitely stole the spotlight tonight." "I wasn't trying to upstage anyone," Tessa protested. "I was just being myself." "That's exactly why it worked," Damien said, loosening his tie. "Your authenticity shines through. It's one of the things I love most about you." Tessa moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "Tonight felt like a dream," she said softly. "Being there with you, dancing, meeting your friends. A year ago, I never could have imagined any of this." Damien came to stand behind her, his hands gently resting on her shoulders. "And now? Can you imagine it now?" She turned to face him. "Now I can imagine anything. You've shown me that." Damien's eyes darkened as he looked at her. "Tessa," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've brought light back into my world when I thought I'd live in darkness forever." "You've done the same for me," she replied, reaching up to touch his face. "You've shown me what it means to be truly valued, truly seen." They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken desires. Then Damien stepped back slightly. "It's late," he said. "We should get some rest. We have an early flight tomorrow." Tessa nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Always so careful, always so respectful of her boundaries. Even now, when she was finally ready, truly ready, he was holding back. "You're right," she said. "Good night, Damien." She was halfway to her bedroom when his voice stopped her. "Tessa, wait." She turned to find him looking at her with an intensity that took her breath away. "There's something I need to ask you," he said, closing the distance between them. To her shock, he dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "This isn't how I planned to do this. I had something more elaborate in mind for tomorrow, but I can't wait another moment." Tessa's hand flew to her mouth as he opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Tessa Blake," Damien said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You walked into my life when I'd given up on ever finding love again. You showed me that there was still light, still joy, still hope in the world. You've become my best friend, my confidant, my heart." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Tessa's eyes as she looked down at this man who had changed her life in so many ways. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Damien, I'll marry you." With hands that trembled slightly, he slid the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into his arms. Their kiss was deep and tender, filled with all the love and promise of their future together. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Tessa smiled up at him. "You know, this means Christina was right about one thing." Damien raised an eyebrow. "Oh? What's that?" "You do have a type," she teased. "Women who work for you." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I suppose I do. But there's a key difference. You're the last one, the only one from now on." The next morning, Tessa woke early, her new ring catching the first light of dawn as she stretched. Damien was still asleep beside her, his face peaceful in repose. She slipped quietly from the bed and made her way to the living room of their suite, where she found her purse and extracted a small notepad and pen. For a few minutes, she sat at the desk, writing thoughtfully. Then she folded the note carefully and returned to the bedroom, placing it on her pillow before heading to the bathroom to shower. By the time she emerged, wrapped in a fluffy hotel robe, Damien was awake, sitting up in bed with her note in his hand, a look of wonder on his face. "You found it," she said softly. "Tessa," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Are you sure?" She crossed the room to sit beside him on the bed. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He looked down at the note again, reading her words aloud. "You asked me for something once. I said yes, not because I feel I have to, but because I want you forever. If you're ready now, I am too." Damien reached out to touch her face, his eyes filled with a love so pure it took her breath away. "I love you," he said simply, "more than I can ever express." "Then don't try to express it with words," Tessa replied, leaning into his touch. "Show me." As Damien gathered her into his arms, Tessa knew that she had found something far more precious than the physical intimacy she had once offered him from a place of insecurity and fear. She had found a man who valued her heart, her mind, her spirit. A man who had taught her that her worth didn't lie in what she could give, but in who she was. And as they came together finally, in the soft morning light, Tessa understood the gift Damien had given her when he walked away that night by the fireplace. Not rejection, but respect. Not denial, but dignity. He had chosen to wait for her heart to awaken fully. He had chosen to love all of her, not just her body. He had chosen to show her that she was worth waiting for, worth cherishing, worth loving completely. And in doing so, he had given her something far more powerful than she had ever imagined. The knowledge of her own value, the strength of her own heart, and the joy of a love built on mutual respect and understanding. A love that would last a lifetime.